All right, let's get into it with the two-time Super Bowl champ, Bryant McFadden. What a way to end the week here, B-Mac. It's vintage Tom versus time. Down 13 with a handful of minutes left. He comes all the way back and really saves a season. I know they were out in front and they were going to be the division leaders no matter how this game ended, but they found so much in the final 3 minutes of this game. You walk away from this feeling what?
Well, it was ugly. It was hard to watch. But like you mentioned, when you have number 12, you're never out of it. So this game for me, when I walk away from this game, Joe, the first thing I think about is only two series in regards to Tampa that allowed them to win this ball game. That's the only positive I get from this ball game. They played 4 quarters, but you only remember 2 offensive possessions in the fourth quarter for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because throughout the entire ball game, the New Orleans Saints, they had the upper hand on the Buccaneers offense. But the last 2 drives in the fourth quarter was all that Tom Brady needed. And think about this, when you talk about playing against a guy like Tom Brady, clearly no efficiency for 3 quarters, for 4 quarters to say the least, couldn't do anything running the football. If you just score 1 touchdown, Andy Dalton, this game is over. So just settling for field goals, and let's tip our hats to the Buccaneers defense being able to be outstanding in the red zone, and they kept fighting. They never wavered. They gave Tom Brady the opportunity that he needed. And like you said, when you talk about Tom Brady, if there's at least a minute on the clock, he has hope, he has a shot, and he was able to cash in on that tonight.
It was an ugly 57 minutes of football for this Buccaneers team, and I think the same can really be said for the first 13 weeks of this season. They found wins. They have not been pretty. It's an offense that struggled to find any sort of momentum or tempo, but they go tempo there, forced to over the final 3 minutes. How does Tampa Bay build off this from an offensive standpoint? What did you see over those last 3 minutes that maybe they could build upon in the weeks to come?
Well, Joe, I know you've heard me say this quite a bit, throughout the NFL season. When you see inconsistent offenses, I always holler tempo, utilize tempo, because their offenses in the National Football League, they're not good enough just to huddle and do things the generic slow way. And I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they're one of those offenses, because you talk about what was the difference. We saw a sense of urgency. We saw tempo. They were able to go fast, not huddling up. And the thing that helped them the most was the New Orleans Saints. They were kind of playing defense on their heels. They couldn't really get settled in to understand what they're doing. So if I'm Byron Leftwich, if I'm Todd Bowles, I'll walk away from this game offensively seeing the success that happened in the final 2.5 minutes of this ball game was more about quality, consistency being displayed, but also tempo. Now you kind of get the defense, you keep them on their heels, and Tom Brady was able to execute. And also, when you talk about utilizing tempo, Joe, understanding and knowing your offensive line, they've been so inconsistent because of injuries. Now that helps them a little bit, because guess what? You kind of fatigue, you kind of tire out the guys that are rushing the passer. So that's my biggest takeaway from this ball game outside of the final 2 minutes. What can they do to kind of duplicate the success they had in the final 2 minutes moving forward throughout the rest of the year? Utilize tempo. You're not good enough to huddle. Go fast.
Mac, I want to read you some stuff here because this is historic what we just watched happen. Tom Brady leading his team down the field over the last 3 minutes. It's the second largest fourth quarter comeback in his career, second to only the 28-3 game. It's his first career win when down 13 or more points in the final 5 minutes of a ball game. It's the latest go-ahead touchdown pass in his career. It's his 56th career game-winning drive in the fourth quarter. Shout out to CBS Stats and Info for getting us all of these stats here in real time. But big picture, we're talking about Tom Brady, 23 years in the game. We expect this level of greatness for him, but to see him do it time and again, do you offer yourself a moment to just sit back, take a deep breath, and appreciate what we're watching?
No question, because it's safe to say he's definitely closer to the end than the beginning. So savor every moment, even if you're a Tom Brady hater, if you're a Buccaneers hater, savor every moment, because this is greatness. This game was so ugly for the Buccaneers on the offensive side. You talked about 57 minutes of horror play, horrific play. It was that. But guess what? This man was cool, he was calm, and he just believed. And his defense, let's tip our hat to the Buccaneers defense. They kept fighting because if they allowed one touchdown, it doesn't matter what happened in the final 2 minutes. It would have been a loss, an ugly loss. So their defense kept them within reach offensively. Like you said, Tom Brady. And the thing about Tom Brady being 23 years in the game, Joe, I don't know if there's another quarterback you trust when you need a score.
Give me that,
in
man.
the final moments of a ball game. I don't know if there's another guy you trust more because you just gave us the stats. Shout out from our stat crew as well as you mentioned. He's done it over and over and over again. And it seems like every time he does this, it amazes us. We've seen this storyline how many times, Joe? We've seen it before. But in tonight's matchup, you're like, no, he can't do it. You're down 13 points in the fourth quarter. It's a wrap. Offense, he can't block anybody. Tom Brady's he's missing throws. He's inaccurate. It's a wrap. And then we walk away like, he did it again.
And that is the big picture of it all. Watching Tom Brady do it time and again here, you got to respect what he's accomplished in this game, in his career. But let's get back to the moment because this was a big win in the division. Now 6-6, a game and a half clear of the Atlanta Falcons. And New Orleans with a win would have drawn within a half a game of the Bucs. So this was a big-time result in this division. When you step away from this, and we do take a moment to really soak it all in and see what just happened, and we boil it down to the numbers, does this feel like the turning point in a season for the Buccaneers that could really serve as the catalyst? Or does this look like a one-off and you expect those struggles to once again rear their head next week in Week 14?
One-off.
Okay.
We've seen these struggles the entire year. That's why they're 6-6, right at the 500 point in the season, because they've been so inconsistent. I can tell you this much, it gives them a sigh of relief within their division alone because, like you stated, if the Saints win this ball game, they make things a little more interesting within the NFC South. But winning this ball game for Tampa Bay creates a little more cushion, not just from the Saints, but Atlanta, and of course, Carolina is just doing what Carolina does. But in regards to the other playoff caliber teams in the NFC, no, I still have my concerns. Now, can we see consistency, not just in 1 week of play, what about 2 weeks? What about 3 weeks? Because I, for one, believe when you talk about going into January football, you don't want to be a team that's limping into January football. You want to be a team that's sprinting, not jogging, but sprinting. Because the team that sprints, they have a long sprint. They sprint the furthest. And that's something that we oftentimes see in regards with teams that make a deep postseason run. So right now, it's safe to say they're limping. They're finding a way to stay on their feet, but they're limping. Can they finally get off the start running? We have to wait and see. But tonight, cheers to Tampa Bay. They live to fight another day. They create separation within the division. And that's the most important thing because it seems like, Joe, even though the Buccaneers have been struggling, if they get into the playoffs and, of course, they host a playoff game, you still got to feel a little bit of hope knowing that you have number 12, right? It feels that way, even though it's been ugly for them the entire year. But if you see Tampa hosting a playoff game, and clearly that's the only way they're going to get in the playoffs, they got to win a division and to be able to host one. You never know what 12. Remember a year ago against the Rams, right? You remember the Rams jumped on top, all the injuries to the wide receivers, and 12 made that thing extremely dicey towards the end of the ball game. Granted, Matthew Stafford and them prevailed, but he made it real interesting. You never know.
As it currently stands, it would be the Buccaneers playing host to the Dallas Cowboys in that first round of the playoffs. But we got plenty more football to get to. And whether limping, jogging, or sprinting, this is a Bucs team that's headed at a brick wall waiting in Santa Clara next week. It's going to be a whole lot of fun to break it down with the Mac Man. Thank you, B-Mac.
Yes, sir.
And don't forget, there's more Mac to be had as B-Mac and P2 sit down with some of the biggest names in sports and entertainment week in and week out. We'll even take you into the locker room from time to time after a ball game with the Vikes playing some good football as well. Download, subscribe, and enjoy all things covered.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.